6 months after my son's wedding, the photographer called me at 9:47 on a rainy Thursday night. His voice sounded nervous. "Mrs. Morgan, I found something from the wedding. Something I don't think you were ever supposed to see. At first I thought maybe Ryan and Vanessa wanted extra photos printed. But then Noah said quietly, 'You need to come alone.' The next afternoon I sat inside his dark photography studio in downtown Chicago while he opened a folder labeled Morgan Wedding, unedited. And when the image appeared on his screen, my stomach dropped so hard I nearly stopped breathing, because the woman reaching into my purse was my daughter-in-law. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. And please tell me in the comments, have you ever felt pushed aside by someone you loved? After everything you sacrificed for them, I always read your stories. And before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there tonight. My name is Erica Morgan, and for most of my life being a mother was the only thing I was truly certain I had done right. I was 26 years old when my husband Thomas died. Ryan was only 7. Thomas had been a firefighter in Columbus, Ohio, the kind of man who held doors open for strangers and remembered birthdays without reminders. He used to leave little notes in my lunch bag before work. Sometimes they were silly, sometimes romantic. Once he drew a terrible stick figure version of our family with the words, "No matter what happens, we've already won." 3 weeks after his funeral, I found myself sitting on the kitchen floor at 2 a.m, staring at overdue bills while Ryan slept upstairs clutching one of his father's old sweatshirts. I remember thinking, you are not allowed to fall apart now, so I didn't. I worked mornings as a school secretary and evenings balancing accounting records for a small plumbing company. There were years I barely slept. Years I stretched soup for 3 nights because Ryan needed new soccer cleats. Years I pretended I wasn't hungry so he could have seconds. But I never regretted any of it, not once. Because Ryan was a beautiful child, kind, funny, gentle. When he was 10, he used to sit beside me while I paid bills and say, "One day I'm going to buy you a giant house, Mom. One with a porch swing." I'd laugh and kiss his forehead. By high school, he was brilliant. Straight A's, debate team captain, scholarships. Teachers adored him. And when he got accepted into Northwestern Law School, I cried so hard in the parking lot after dropping him off that a security guard came over to ask if I was okay. "I'm fine," I told him through tears. "That's my son in there." For a long time, Ryan called me almost every night. Sometimes just to tell me what he ate for dinner. Sometimes to complain about professors. Sometimes because he missed home. Those calls became the center of my life. After graduation, Ryan got hired by a prestigious law firm in Chicago. I still remember the excitement in his voice. "Mom," he said, "this changes everything for us. Us." That word mattered to me more than he probably realized. At first, nothing changed between us. He came home for Thanksgiving. He sent flowers on Mother's Day. He called every Sunday morning while I drank coffee in my kitchen. Then one winter evening, he mentioned a woman named Vanessa Whitmore. "She's incredible," he said. "Smartest person in the room without trying to be." I smiled immediately. Every mother wants her child to find love. A few months later, Ryan invited me to Chicago to meet her. I spent 2 weeks worrying about what to wear. That probably sounds foolish at my age, but Chicago felt different from Columbus. Bigger, sharper, wealthier. Ryan picked me up outside Union Station wearing a charcoal coat that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. But when he hugged me, he still smelled like the same little boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during road trips. "You look beautiful, Mom," he said, and for a moment everything felt normal. Vanessa chose a rooftop restaurant overlooking the river. The second I walked in, I knew I was out of place. Women in sleek dresses sipped wine beside floor-to-ceiling windows. Men wore watches that probably cost more than my car. Then I saw Vanessa. She was stunning. Tall, polished, elegant, dark blonde hair perfectly styled, cream-colored coat draped over her shoulders like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. When she smiled at me, it looked practiced. "Mrs. Morgan," she said warmly, air-kissing my cheek. "Ryan talks about you all the time." Her perfume smelled expensive, soft and floral. I wanted desperately to like her. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Vanessa asked polite questions about Columbus and my retirement. Ryan looked happy beside her. But then her mother arrived, Linda Whitmore. Nobody had told me she'd be joining us. She swept into the restaurant wearing diamonds and confidence, immediately taking control of the table without even trying. "Ah," she said, glancing at me quickly before sitting down. "So this is Ryan's mother." Something about the way she said it made me feel small. Not openly cruel, just measured. Throughout dinner, Linda dominated every conversation. private schools, vacation homes, art auctions. At one point, she asked where I traveled during summers. I smiled awkwardly. Honestly, I never had much time for vacations while Ryan was growing up. Oh, Linda replied lightly before sipping wine. Of course. The silence afterward felt humiliating. Ryan didn't notice. Or maybe he did and chose not to. Vanessa reached for his hand constantly during dinner. Tiny gestures, perfect timing. She knew exactly how to command attention without appearing demanding. And every time Ryan looked at her, he looked captivated. I remember excusing myself to the restroom halfway through dinner just to breathe. Inside the marble bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. Simple navy blouse, drugstore lipstick, tiny wrinkle near my mouth I suddenly hated. For the first time in years, I felt embarrassed by who I was. Not because anyone directly insulted me, but because I realized Vanessa and her family came from a world where people like me were tolerated politely, not truly respected. Still, when Ryan proposed 6 months later, I told myself love mattered more than class differences. I ignored the knot in my stomach, ignored how Vanessa never visited Columbus, ignored how Linda referred to my home as quaint, ignored how Ryan started sounding distracted during phone calls. One evening he called while I was making spaghetti. Vanessa wants a small engagement dinner, he explained. Mostly her family and business friends. Oh, I said quietly. All right. You understand, right? Of course I understood. That became my role over time. Understanding. Understanding why they were too busy to visit. Understanding why holidays changed. Understanding why I was slowly becoming less important in my own son's life. But the worst part, I kept convincing myself it was temporary. That once the wedding stress ended, Ryan would come back to me emotionally. I had no idea the wedding itself was only the beginning. And if I had listened to the fear growing inside me back then, maybe I would have seen the warning signs much sooner. When Ryan called to tell me the wedding budget had grown a little, I was standing in the laundry room folding towels. I remember balancing the phone between my shoulder and ear while matching socks. How much is a little? I asked carefully. There was a pause. Then Ryan laughed nervously. Vanessa's parents want something more upscale than we originally planned. Upscale. That word again. I sat down slowly on the edge of the washing machine. Well, what do you need? Another pause. Even now, looking back, I realized my son already knew I would say yes before he even asked. That lakeside venue Vanessa loves requires a larger deposit, he admitted. And there are floral upgrades and guest accommodations. He sounded embarrassed. I could hear it. Ryan had never been spoiled. He hated asking me for money growing up because he knew how hard I worked. That's why I said yes before he even finished explaining. How much, sweetheart? When he told me the number, my chest tightened. It was nearly half of my retirement savings. Money I'd carefully built over decades. Money Thomas and I once dreamed would help us travel someday after retirement. But Thomas was gone, and Ryan was still here. So what else was I supposed to do? I can help, I said quietly. Ryan exhaled with relief so quickly it broke my heart a little. Mom, are you sure? Yes. You've already done enough. I smiled sadly to myself. A mother's love doesn't really understand the phrase enough. Over the next few months, wedding planning swallowed everything. At first, Vanessa included me in group texts. There were discussions about flowers, invitations, seating charts. But slowly, without explanation, I stopped receiving updates. I found out later they had created a separate planning chat without me. The first real sting came during dress shopping. Vanessa had once casually mentioned wanting me there. I even bought a new blouse for the occasion. Then, 2 days before the appointment, Ryan called. Vanessa decided to keep it small, he explained quickly. Just bridesmaids and immediate female family. I blinked. I am immediate family. Silence. Then Ryan sighed softly like I was making things difficult. You know what I mean, Mom? No. Actually, I didn't, but I pretended I did. Oh, I said quietly. Of course. After we hung up, I sat alone at my kitchen table staring at the blouse hanging nearby. Still wrapped in plastic, I told myself not to cry over something so small, but that became the pattern. Small exclusions, small humiliations, small reminders that I no longer fit into my son's new world. One afternoon, Vanessa invited me to lunch downtown when I visited Chicago, for a moment. I felt hopeful again. Maybe we were finally bonding. Maybe I had imagined the distance. The restaurant was elegant and painfully expensive, the kind where menus didn't include prices besides certain items. Vanessa arrived 20 minutes late wearing oversized sunglasses and a cream-colored pantsuit that looked impossibly perfect. I'm so sorry, she said while air kissing my cheek. Everything has been chaos. That's all right, I replied warmly. I genuinely wanted peace between us. For a while, conversation stayed polite. Then the topic shifted to the wedding decor. Vanessa pulled out photos on her phone. We're doing white orchids imported from California, she explained. Linda says hydrangeas can look cheap in large arrangements. Cheap. That word sat between us like a stain. I stirred my iced tea quietly. Vanessa continued talking without noticing or pretending not to notice. Oh, and we changed the musician too. The original string quartet felt a little too... She searched for the word, traditional. I smiled faintly. Traditional isn't always bad. Vanessa laughed softly. I suppose that depends on the tradition. Something about the way she said it made me feel like she wasn't talking about music anymore. Then she glanced at my hands. You still wear your original wedding ring. I looked down instinctively. Thomas's ring still sat beside mine after all these years. Yes, I said softly. Vanessa tilted her head. That's sweet. But it didn't sound sweet. It sounded judgmental somehow, like loyalty itself embarrassed her. Then she said something I never forgot. You know Ryan worries about you being alone in that big house someday. I frowned slightly. I managed just fine. Oh, I know, she replied quickly. But eventually downsizing might make more sense. Less stress, less maintenance. I stared at her. The conversation had shifted so suddenly I almost missed it. She wasn't making casual conversation. She was assessing me, my home, my future. I laughed awkwardly to break the tension. Thomas built that porch himself. I don't think I could leave that house. Vanessa smiled politely. You'd be surprised what people can let go of when the time comes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my little Columbus house touching familiar things. The framed family photos, Thomas's old bookshelf, Ryan's height marks still penciled beside the kitchen doorway. This house wasn't just property. It was my life. A week later, I accidentally discovered something that hurt even more. Ryan and Vanessa had posted engagement photos online. Beautiful rooftop pictures at sunset, laughing together beside the Chicago skyline. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, and not one single photo included me. Not even the family portrait we took afterward. I know that sounds childish. At 64 years old, I shouldn't have cared about social media. But when you spend your entire life loving someone you notice when they slowly erase you from the picture, literally. Then came the rehearsal dinner. Linda Whitmore hosted it at an upscale private club overlooking Lake Michigan. When I arrived, I immediately realized everyone there already knew one another except me. Business executives, old family friends, elegant women in designer dresses. I spent most of the evening smiling politely while strangers asked how I knew the groom, how I knew him, as if I were some distant family acquaintance. At one point during dinner, Richard Whitmore stood to give a toast. To family, he announced confidently, and to legacy. Everyone applauded. Then he spent nearly 10 minutes praising Vanessa, her intelligence, her sophistication, her future, when he finally mentioned Ryan. He called him a man worthy of joining the Whitmore family. Joining. Not creating a new family together, joining theirs. I waited for Ryan to mention me somewhere in his speech afterward. Anything. A thank you, a memory, a single acknowledgement of the woman who sacrificed everything for him. Instead, Ryan smiled proudly at Vanessa and said, I honestly don't know what I'd do without this family. This family. The room applauded, and I sat there smiling while something inside me quietly cracked. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I stood alone at the window overlooking the city lights. My reflection looked older somehow, smaller. I kept replaying Ryan's words in my mind. Maybe he didn't mean to hurt me. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe marriage changed people. I told myself all those things because the alternative was unbearable. The alternative was admitting my son was slowly becoming someone I no longer recognized. And deep down, I think part of me already knew the wedding wouldn't bring our family together. It would expose just how far apart we'd already become. The morning of Ryan's wedding, I woke up before sunrise with a feeling I couldn't explain. Not excitement. Not exactly dread either. Just heaviness. Chicago was wrapped in gray clouds that morning, the kind that made Lake Michigan look cold and endless. I stood by the hotel window holding a cup of weak coffee, watching early traffic move below like tiny streams of light. My son was getting married in a few hours. I should have felt joy. Instead, I felt like I was preparing myself for something painful. I told myself I was being emotional because Thomas wasn't there. That had to be it. Thomas should have been standing beside me helping Ryan tie his tie. He should have been making terrible jokes during wedding photos. He should have been walking around proudly telling strangers, "That's my boy." The absence of him sat beside me all morning like another person in the room. I dressed slowly. The navy dress I wore wasn't expensive, but it was elegant in a quiet way. I had spent nearly an hour styling my silver blonde hair and putting on makeup carefully enough to hide how tired I felt. Before leaving the hotel room, I opened my purse and checked the yellow envelope inside. Everything important was there. My identification, a few banking documents, and a handwritten letter Thomas had written before he died. I carried it with me during major life moments because somehow it made me feel less alone. Then I headed downstairs to the car service Ryan had arranged. The wedding venue was breathtaking, an enormous luxury hotel overlooking the lake filled with crystal chandeliers, white roses, polished marble floors, and staff members dressed like they belonged in royal palaces. Every detail screamed wealth. As soon as I stepped inside, I saw Linda Whitmore directing people like a general preparing for battle. No, those arrangements go near the staircase," she snapped at a florist. "The lighting must feel soft, not yellow." Then she noticed me. Her smile appeared instantly. Artificial. "Erica," she said, air-kissing beside my cheek. "You made it, as though there had ever been doubt." "You look lovely," I replied politely. Her eyes flickered over my dress for half a second too long. "So classic," she said. I couldn't explain why that word felt insulting coming from her. Before I could answer, someone called her name and she disappeared again into the crowd. I stood there awkwardly holding my purse while strangers hurried around me. Nobody told me where to go. Nobody handed me a schedule. Eventually, one of the wedding coordinators approached. "Mrs. Morgan," she asked politely. "Yes." "Oh, good. We've been looking for you." Relief washed through me for one brief second. Then she added, "Your table assignment was moved." Moved. She led me through the ballroom filled with glittering centerpieces and enormous floral displays until we reached a table near the back corner beside the kitchen doors. I stared at the seating card. Table 14. Far away from Ryan. Far away from the bridal party, far away from family. I forced a smile. "Thank you." The coordinator hesitated like she felt uncomfortable too. Then she walked away quickly. I sat down slowly. From where I was seated, I could barely see the sweetheart table clearly. A catering employee brushed past me carrying champagne glasses. The kitchen door swung open and closed constantly behind my chair. For several long moments, I just sat there staring at the gold lettering on the place card. Erica Morgan, Ryan's mother, hidden in the back like an afterthought. I suddenly remembered Ryan's 8th birthday party at a skating rink in Columbus. He had fallen hard while racing another little boy and scraped both knees bloody. He cried so hard, people stared. But the second he saw me rushing toward him, he wrapped his arms around my waist and said, "I knew you'd come." Back then, I had been his safe place. Now I wasn't even important enough for a decent table. The ceremony itself was beautiful, painfully beautiful. Vanessa walked down the aisle in a fitted white gown covered in delicate lace, while a string quartet played softly nearby. Guests actually gasped when they saw her. Ryan looked emotional too. And for a moment, watching my son standing there in his tuxedo, I forgot every hurt feeling. He looked happy, really happy. Tears filled my eyes immediately. I kept thinking about Thomas, about all the years between that tiny boy in soccer cleats and the man standing at the altar now. Life moves cruelly fast. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, everyone applauded. I clapped too, even while something inside me ached. During cocktail hour, I wandered awkwardly near the edge of the ballroom, while groups chatted around me. That's when I first noticed Noah Bennett, the photographer. He looked to be around 40, maybe early 40s. Dark hair, slightly messy, camera hanging from his shoulder, sharp, observant eyes. Unlike everyone else, he actually looked at people instead of through them. At one point, he caught me standing alone near the window. "You all right?" he asked gently. I laughed softly. "Do I look that obvious?" "A little." There was kindness in his voice. Real kindness, not polished politeness. I smiled faintly. "Big days are emotional, I suppose." He nodded slowly, like he understood more than I was saying. Then someone called him away for family portraits. Family portraits. I still remember that part vividly. The Whitmores gathered first, perfectly arranged, perfectly dressed. Richard and Linda in the center beside Ryan and Vanessa. Siblings, cousins, friends. I stood nearby waiting to be included. At one point, Noah glanced toward me uncertainly. "Should we bring Ryan's mother in for the next set?" Before Ryan could answer, Linda stepped forward smoothly. We're doing immediate family first. I blinked. Immediate family, again. Noah looked uncomfortable. Ryan hesitated only a second before turning back toward Vanessa. We'll do more later. Later never came. I stood there watching strangers take photos with my son while nobody called my name. Nobody noticed when I quietly walked away. I ended up sitting alone near the edge of the outdoor terrace overlooking the lake. Cold wind lifted my hair gently. Inside, music and laughter echoed through the ballroom while I sat in silence trying not to cry. That's when Noah appeared again. Without speaking, he quietly lifted his camera. Click. I looked up. You don't have to photograph me, I said softly. He lowered the camera slightly. I think someone should. Those words nearly broke me. Throughout the evening, I kept noticing Noah nearby, capturing moments nobody else paid attention to. Me sitting alone at dinner, me watching Ryan dance with Vanessa, me wiping tears discreetly during speeches. At one point, Richard Whitmore stood to toast the couple. He thanked business associates, friends, Vanessa's family, the wedding planners, the chef, even the florist, but not me. Not once. And Ryan? He didn't correct him. He just smiled beside his bride while the room applauded. Something inside me went painfully quiet after that. Not angry, not dramatic, just numb. Later that night, while couples danced beneath golden lights, I realized something terrifying. I no longer felt like I belonged in my son's life. And somewhere across the ballroom, Noah Bennett kept taking photographs. Photographs that 6 months later would change everything. By the time dinner ended, my head was pounding from smiling too much. That sounds strange, doesn't it? But there's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from pretending your heart isn't breaking in public. The ballroom had transformed after sunset. Soft gold lights reflected against crystal centerpieces, while a live jazz band played near the dance floor. Guests laughed loudly over expensive champagne, and servers floated through the room carrying trays of miniature desserts I couldn't even pronounce. Everything looked perfect. That was the strange thing about the Whitmores. They knew how to create perfection so beautifully that nobody noticed the cruelty underneath it. I sat quietly at table 14 picking at a slice of sea bass that had long gone cold. Nobody at my table knew me well. Most were business acquaintances of Richard Whitmore or distant connections from Vanessa's social circle. A woman beside me spent nearly 20 minutes discussing luxury vacation properties in Aspen without asking me a single personal question. At one point, she finally turned politely toward me. And how do you know the bride and groom? The question hit me so hard I almost laughed. I'm Ryan's mother, I said softly. Her face changed instantly. Oh, just oh. Embarrassment flashed across her expression before she quickly looked away. I excused myself soon after. The hallway outside the ballroom was quieter, lined with enormous white floral arrangements and mirrored walls that reflected the soft golden lighting. I leaned against one of the marble columns and closed my eyes for a second. I told myself to hold it together. Just a few more hours, then you can go home. As I stood there trying to steady myself, I realized I had left my phone inside my purse near the ballroom restroom. I turned back down the hallway toward the bridal suite area, where guests had been storing coats and personal belongings earlier in the evening. The closer I got, the quieter things became. Most people were dancing now. Then I heard laughter. Women's voices. Vanessa's voice was unmistakable. I slowed instinctively. The bridal suite door wasn't fully closed, just slightly open. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. At least not at first. But then I heard my name. I'm serious, Vanessa whispered with a laugh. After tonight, she won't be a problem anymore. The words froze me in place. Linda Whitmore laughed softly too. Oh, honey, you handled this much better than I expected. My chest tightened immediately. Another voice, one of the bridesmaids, I think, said quietly, Ryan still seems attached to her, though. Vanessa scoffed. Not for long. The room erupted into low laughter again. I stood completely still outside that half-open door, suddenly unable to breathe properly. Linda's voice floated out next. You have to establish boundaries early with mothers like that. Mothers like that. I felt heat rise into my face. Vanessa sighed dramatically. She means well, but Ryan feels guilty around her. It's exhausting. Guilty. The word cut deeper than anything else, because suddenly I understood. Every phone call Ryan rushed through, every awkward silence, every moment he pulled away from me emotionally. Vanessa had turned my love into a burden. I should have walked away right then. Instead, I stayed frozen as Vanessa continued speaking. She still thinks she's the center of his life. More laughter. Then Linda added coldly, That changes tonight. Something inside me cracked open quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to hurt in a way I knew would stay with me forever. I stepped backward carefully before anyone could see me standing there. My hands were trembling. I remember gripping the hallway wall because suddenly I felt dizzy. Part of me wanted to storm inside that room and confront them immediately. Another part of me was humiliated beyond words. Because the truth was, they were right about one thing. I had believed Ryan and I would always remain close. Maybe not the center of each other's lives forever, but connected. Important. Family. Instead, I had become an obstacle to remove politely. A problem. I finally retrieved my purse from near the restroom and headed toward the ballroom again in a daze. That's when Ryan found me. "There you are," he said quickly, walking toward me in his tuxedo. "Vanessa's been looking for you." I stared at him. My little boy. The child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The teenager who once worked an entire summer washing dishes to buy me a birthday necklace because he said I deserved something beautiful. And now here, he stood smiling beneath ballroom lights while his new wife mocked me behind closed doors. "Mom, you think I'm a problem?" I asked quietly. His expression changed instantly. What I swallowed hard. I heard Vanessa. Ryan's jaw tightened immediately. "You were listening outside the bridal suite." The defensiveness in his voice stunned me. Not concern, not confusion. Defensiveness. "I wasn't trying to," I whispered. "Ryan," she said, "after tonight I wouldn't be a problem anymore." He exhaled sharply and rubbed his forehead. Oh my God. The frustration in his voice made my stomach drop. She didn't mean it like that. Then how did she mean it? "You're being emotional right now." That sentence hurt more than the other somehow, because it sounded rehearsed, like something Vanessa herself would say. Ryan lowered his voice further. "Mom, please don't make tonight difficult." Difficult? I stared at him in disbelief. "I'm difficult." "That's not what I said, but it's what you meant." People nearby were beginning to glance toward us. Ryan noticed too. He stepped closer and forced a tight smile. "Can we not do this here?" I suddenly realized something devastating. He was embarrassed by me. Not concerned about me. Embarrassed. Tears burned behind my eyes immediately, but I refused to cry in front of him. Not there. Not while music played 20 feet away and strangers laughed nearby, so I nodded once. "You're right," I said softly. "I won't ruin your night." His shoulders relaxed slightly with relief. Relief. Not guilt, not sadness. Relief. That almost destroyed me. Ryan kissed my cheek quickly. "I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" But he didn't. Not the next day. Not the day after that either. I left the wedding early without saying goodbye to most people. Outside, cold lake wind whipped against my dress while valet attendants rushed around beneath glowing hotel lights. I sat alone in the back seat of the car service, staring out the window as Chicago blurred past. My reflection looked pale and exhausted in the glass. At one stoplight, I opened my purse, searching for tissues. That's when I noticed the yellow envelope was slightly out of place. I frowned. For a moment, I could have sworn I hadn't left it tilted sideways like that, but I was emotionally drained and probably imagining things. So I straightened it absent-mindedly and closed my purse again. I had no idea that small detail would matter later. No idea that while I sat crying quietly in the back of that car, something far worse than humiliation had already begun. Ryan never called the next day. At first, I told myself he was busy. Newly married couples deserve privacy, time together, space to build a life. That's what I kept repeating in my head during the long train ride back to Columbus. But days passed, then weeks, and slowly something that had once felt temporary began feeling permanent. The silence changed shape. Before the wedding, Ryan and I spoke constantly, even if conversations had grown shorter. A quick Sunday check-in, a text about work, a funny photo from the grocery store. After the wedding, nothing happened naturally anymore. Every conversation felt scheduled, delayed, managed. And somehow Vanessa was always involved. The first time I noticed it clearly was 3 weeks after the wedding. I called Ryan on a Tuesday evening after seeing a news report about severe storms near Chicago. He answered on the fourth ring. "Hey, Mom." His voice sounded distracted. "Hi, sweetheart." "I just wanted to make sure you were safe with all the weather." "We're fine." "We." In the background, I could hear dishes clinking and Vanessa laughing softly at something. "Good," I said. "I worry." Another pause. Then Vanessa's voice floated faintly through the phone. Ask her if she got the restaurant recommendation I sent. Ryan repeated it immediately like a messenger. Vanessa wants to know if you saw that Italian place she texted you about. I blinked. Yes. Cool. Silence again. I waited for Ryan to ask about my day, my health, anything. Instead, he sounded eager to end the call. Well, we're about to eat dinner. Of course they were. I'll let you go, I said quietly. Love you, Mom. But he said it automatically, the way people say drive safe. Then the line disconnected. I stood in my kitchen staring at my phone long after the call ended. That was the first night I cried openly since the wedding. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears while washing dishes alone. Because deep down, I realized something painful. Ryan no longer reached for me emotionally. And once a child stops reaching for you, there's no way to force your way back into their heart without pushing them further away. So I tried to become easier, less needy, less visible. I stopped calling first, stopped sending articles I thought Ryan would enjoy, stopped asking when they might visit Columbus. Weeks turned into months. Thanksgiving came next. Ryan had never missed Thanksgiving at home before. Not once, even during law school, but this year Vanessa's family hosted a private holiday dinner in Aspen. Ryan called 2 days beforehand. Mom, I know this is different. He said carefully, but Vanessa's parents already planned everything. I stared at the half-finished pie dough on my counter. Oh, we'll come after Christmas, but they didn't. Christmas morning arrived cold and painfully quiet. I still decorated the house out of habit. Hung stockings, made cinnamon rolls, wrapped gifts. One present sat under the tree for Ryan until January. A leather photo album filled with pictures of Thomas and Ryan growing up together. Ryan never came to get it. Around noon on Christmas Day, he finally FaceTimed me briefly from a ski lodge. Vanessa appeared beside him wearing white winter clothes and diamond earrings that sparkled beneath the lights. Merry Christmas, Erica, she said brightly. Erica. Not Mom, not Mrs. Morgan, just Erica, like we were co-workers. Ryan smiled tiredly. Sorry we missed today. It's all right, I lied. Behind them, I could hear laughter and music. The Whitmores filled the room around them like a world Ryan now belonged to completely. We should plan something in spring, Vanessa suggested casually. Ryan nodded immediately. Definitely. But even as they said it, I could tell neither of them meant it seriously. The call lasted less than 4 minutes. Afterward, I sat alone beside the Christmas tree listening to the silence inside my house. That silence became familiar over the next several months. Heavy. Constant. One afternoon in February, Ryan finally visited Columbus for work-related meetings nearby. I spent 2 straight days cleaning the house before he arrived. I cooked pot roast, bought his favorite coffee creamer, even changed the guest room sheets despite knowing he likely wouldn't stay overnight. When his car finally pulled into the driveway, my heart lifted instantly despite everything. He still looked like my son. Same dark hair, same tired eyes, same crooked smile. For a little while, things almost felt normal again. We drank coffee at the kitchen table while snow fell softly outside. Ryan loosened his tie and sighed deeply. God, it's nice being here. That sentence alone nearly made me emotional. Then slowly the conversation shifted. I've been thinking about something Ryan said carefully. I noticed the tone immediately. Prepared? Rehearsed? What is it? He glanced around the kitchen. This house is a lot for one person. There it was. My stomach tightened instantly. I managed fine. I know, he said quickly, but maintenance, repairs, taxes? Eventually it becomes overwhelming. I stared at him. These aren't your words? Ryan frowned slightly. What's that supposed to mean? It means Vanessa has said the exact same thing. His expression hardened almost immediately. She's concerned about you. No, I replied softly. She's concerned about this house. Silence filled the kitchen. Ryan leaned back in his chair. Mom, why do you always assume the worst about her? I almost laughed at that. Because the truth was, I had spent months trying not to assume the worst, trying to be patient, understanding, grateful for scraps of attention. I don't assume the worst, I said quietly. I notice patterns. Ryan rubbed his forehead. Nobody's trying to take your house. The way he said it felt strange. Too fast. Too defensive. I didn't say anyone was. Another silence. Then Ryan sighed heavily. Vanessa just thinks you'd be happier somewhere smaller. Maybe a condo near us eventually. Near us. Not with us. Close enough to monitor. far enough to contain. Something cold settled in my chest. I'm not leaving this house. Ryan looked frustrated now. You're being stubborn? I stared at him in disbelief. That house contained every memory of my life. Thomas teaching Ryan to ride a bike in the driveway, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, the height marks on the wall. The porch Thomas built himself before cancer weakened his hands. And my son called, protecting those memories stubborn. That night after Ryan left, I wandered through the house feeling unsettled. Something felt wrong. Not emotionally, physically. I opened the small desk drawer in my bedroom where I kept important papers. Inside folders had shifted slightly. At first I thought I was imagining it. Then I noticed one document missing. My property tax file. I froze. I searched everywhere. Nothing. Maybe I had misplaced it. Maybe Ryan accidentally moved papers while helping me fix the printer earlier. But deep down, fear had already started growing. For the first time in my life, my own home no longer felt completely safe. And somewhere far away in Chicago, people were already making plans involving things that belonged to me. The call from Noah Bennett came exactly 12 days after Ryan's visit to Columbus. It was raining hard that evening. I remember because the wind kept rattling the kitchen windows while I reheated leftover soup I wasn't really hungry for. Since the wedding, I had gotten used to eating alone in silence. Sometimes I turned the television on just to hear another human voice in the room. My phone rang at 9:47 p.m., unknown number. Normally, I ignored unfamiliar calls at night, but something made me answer anyway. Hello? There was a slight pause before a man spoke. Mrs. Morgan. Yes. This is Noah Bennett. I photographed Ryan and Vanessa's wedding. Immediately, my stomach tightened. For one terrible second, I thought someone had died. I'm sorry for calling so late, he continued carefully. I wasn't sure if I should contact you at all. His tone unsettled me instantly. What's wrong? Another pause. Then, Noah lowered his voice. I found something while backing up the wedding files. I gripped the kitchen counter harder. What kind of something? He hesitated again, like he was choosing his words carefully. I think there's something from that night you were never supposed to see. Cold spread through my chest. I leaned against the counter slowly. At first, I assumed maybe he had discovered more embarrassing photos of me crying alone at the reception. God knew there had been enough of those moments. I don't understand, I whispered. I'd rather show you in person. The rain outside suddenly sounded louder. Noah, what is this about? I can't explain it properly over the phone. His voice carried genuine discomfort, not gossip, not curiosity, concern. That frightened me more than anything. Then he added quietly, you need to come alone. The next afternoon, I drove to Chicago. The entire 4-hour drive felt surreal. Part of me kept insisting this was ridiculous. Maybe Noah had overreacted. Maybe there was some innocent misunderstanding involving wedding staff or misplaced belongings. But another part of me, the part that had been growing increasingly uneasy for months, already knew this was connected to Vanessa, to the strange comments, the missing papers, the way Ryan had started looking at me like I was becoming inconvenient. By the time I reached downtown Chicago, my nerves felt stretched thin. Noah's photography studio sat inside an old brick warehouse converted into creative office spaces. Exposed beams, tall industrial windows, quiet hallways that smelled faintly like coffee and printer ink. When I stepped inside the studio, Noah immediately stood up from behind his desk. He looked uncomfortable the moment he saw me. That alone terrified me. Mrs. Morgan, he said gently, thank you for coming. I nodded nervously. You're scaring me a little, I know. He motioned toward a chair near a large computer monitor. Would you like coffee or water first? No, I said quickly. Please just tell me why I'm here. Noah sat down across from me slowly. For several seconds he didn't speak. Then he exhaled heavily. I almost deleted these files. My heartbeat quickened. They were part of a secondary backup folder from the wedding. Mostly candid shots and accidental captures between posed sessions. I frowned slightly. Why are they important? Noah looked directly at me. Because I think I photographed something illegal. The room suddenly felt too warm. My hands started trembling immediately. Noah turned the monitor toward me. On screen appeared hundreds of tiny image thumbnails from the wedding day. Ballroom photos, family portraits, dance floor moments. Then he clicked a folder labeled Private Back Hallway/Bridal Suite. I was moving quickly between locations, he explained quietly. Sometimes I shoot continuously without realizing exactly what's entering the frame. He opened the first image. It showed the hallway near the bridal suite. Nothing unusual. Guests walking, bridesmaids laughing, a catering employee passing by. Then the next photo appeared, and my breath caught. Vanessa stood near the partially open bridal suite door. Linda Whitmore stood beside her, and between them was a man I vaguely recognized from the wedding reception. Older, gray suit, glasses. All three looked tense. Noah clicked again. This time Vanessa was glancing cautiously down the hallway. Linda appeared to be speaking sharply. The older man held papers in his hand. "What am I looking at?" I whispered. Noah swallowed. "Keep watching." He opened the next image. The air left my lungs completely, because sitting open on the nearby vanity table was my purse. I stared at the screen in horror. "No?" Noah zoomed in carefully. Vanessa's hand was inside my purse, not near it, inside it. The next photo showed Linda standing guard near the doorway while the older man unfolded documents. Another image. Vanessa removing a yellow envelope. My yellow envelope. For several seconds I couldn't breathe at all. "That's..." My voice cracked violently. "That's mine." Noah nodded grimly. I figured that out after reviewing the full sequence. My vision blurred suddenly. I felt physically sick. "That envelope," I whispered. It had personal documents inside. Noah clicked another image. The yellow envelope was now fully open. The older man examined papers while Vanessa pointed at something urgently. My heart slammed painfully against my ribs. Oh my God. Suddenly every strange feeling from that night rushed back at once. The shifted envelope in the car, the missing property tax file, Ryan bringing up my house repeatedly, Vanessa asking about downsizing. I looked at Noah in disbelief. "How long have you had these 6 months?" Anger flashed through me instantly. 6 months? I know, he said quickly. I know how terrible that sounds. Why wouldn't you tell me immediately? Noah rubbed his forehead hard. Because at first I didn't fully understand what I was seeing. I assumed maybe they were helping you with paperwork or handling family documents. That was my purse. I realize that now. His voice carried genuine guilt. I only noticed the envelope clearly during a detailed archive backup last week. Once I zoomed in, he shook his head. I knew something was wrong. I stared back at the screen, at Vanessa, beautiful, elegant, smiling bride only hours earlier, now secretly digging through my belongings behind closed doors. I suddenly remembered her exact words outside the bridal suite. After tonight, she won't be a problem anymore. A chill ran through my entire body. What else is there? I asked quietly. Noah hesitated. Then he opened another image. This one hit me even harder. Because the older man held up a folded handwritten letter. Thomas's letter. I recognized the blue ink instantly. My husband's handwriting. Tears filled my eyes so quickly I couldn't stop them. That letter belonged to my husband, I whispered. Noah looked stunned. Oh, God. He wrote it before he died. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of traffic outside the warehouse windows. For the first time since Thomas passed away 20 years earlier, I felt something dangerously close to rage. Not sadness, not grief, rage. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. They had touched something sacred. Noah leaned forward carefully. There's something else you should know. I wiped my eyes shakily. The man in the photos. Yes. I saw him speaking privately with Richard Whitmore before the ceremony. I stared at him. Do you know who he is? Noah nodded slowly. One of the venue staff recognized him later. He paused. He's a private notary who works with high-value property transfers. The entire room seemed to tilt slightly around me. Property transfers, my house, my missing documents. Suddenly, all the scattered pieces began connecting into something horrifying. And deep down, I realized this had never been about family tension alone. It had been a plan. I didn't remember driving back to my hotel after leaving Noah's studio. The entire city blurred around me in fragments of headlights and cold rain streaking across the windshield. My hands trembled so badly at red lights that I had to grip the steering wheel with both hands, just to steady myself. Vanessa had gone through my purse. Linda had helped her. And some private notary connected to property transfers had examined my personal documents during my son's wedding. Even thinking the words felt unreal. By the time I reached the hotel, I felt physically ill. I barely made it into the bathroom before vomiting. Afterward, I sat on the cold tile floor, staring at the wall for a long time. Because suddenly every strange moment from the past 6 months looked different. Every conversation, every delayed phone call, every uncomfortable comment about my house. I had spent months blaming myself for being emotional, paranoid, sensitive. But mothers know when something feels wrong, even when they desperately try not to believe it. Around midnight, I finally forced myself to open my purse again. The yellow envelope was gone now, of course. It had disappeared shortly after the wedding, but at the time I assumed I'd misplaced it while traveling. Inside that envelope had been copies of my house deed tax information, insurance records, and Thomas's handwritten letter. At first glance, none of those documents seemed dangerous alone, but together someone could learn a great deal about my finances, about my property, about what I owned. I suddenly remembered something else too. 3 weeks after the wedding, I'd received a strange voicemail from an unfamiliar office asking me to confirm paperwork discussions regarding future residential planning. I had assumed it was spam and deleted it. Now my blood ran cold remembering it. The next morning, I called Noah before I even drank coffee. "I need copies of every photo," I said immediately. "I already prepared them," he replied quietly. Of course he had. He must have realized how serious this was. An hour later, I returned to the studio. Noah handed me a flash drive and several printed enlargements spread carefully across a large editing table. Seeing them printed somehow made everything worse, more real. In one image, Vanessa stood with one hand inside my purse while smiling casually toward the hallway like she wasn't doing anything wrong. In another, Linda folded her arms and watched the corridor cautiously. Then there was the clearest image of all. The older man, the notary. He held one of my property documents beneath the bridal suite lighting, while Vanessa pointed toward a section near the bottom. Noah enlarged the image further. "Here," he said softly. I leaned closer. My stomach twisted violently. There, partially visible near the bottom corner of the document, was my signature, or at least a copy of it. My mind started racing instantly. How clear are these originals, I asked. Very. Could someone tell what document they were holding? Possibly with forensic enhancement. I sat down heavily in the nearby chair. Suddenly, Noah looked deeply uncomfortable again. "There's another reason I contacted you." I looked up. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "Mrs. Morgan?" After I recognized the property paperwork, I searched public records. Fear tightened instantly in my chest, and Noah swallowed hard. 3 months ago, someone initiated preliminary transfer paperwork involving your home. The room went silent. I stared at him. "What?" "It didn't complete successfully," he said quickly. "But there was activity." I felt dizzy again. "No." Noah turned his laptop toward me. Public county records filled the screen. There it was. My address, my home, and beneath it, legal filing activity connected to ownership review requests. I covered my mouth with shaking fingers. They were trying to transfer my house? I don't know exactly what stage they reached, Noah admitted carefully, but something was started. My entire body went cold. For several seconds, all I could think about was Ryan. Did he know? Had he signed something? Had Vanessa convinced him this was normal somehow? Or had my son become part of something much uglier than I wanted to imagine? Noah sat across from me quietly. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know this is overwhelming." I laughed bitterly through tears. "Overwhelming," my voice cracked sharply. "I spent 20 years sacrificing everything for my son. I buried my husband young. I worked myself sick to give Ryan opportunities I never had. I looked at the photos again, and now his wife is stealing documents out of my purse at their wedding." Noah didn't answer. What could he possibly say? I stood suddenly and walked toward the tall warehouse windows overlooking downtown Chicago. People moved normally below. Traffic lights changed. Pedestrians carried coffee cups. Entire lives continued peacefully while mine suddenly felt shattered. "I keep asking myself one question," I whispered. Noah stayed quiet behind me. "Why humiliate me first?" The words surprised even me, because that was the part I couldn't stop replaying. Not just the theft, the cruelty before it, the emotional isolation, the way Vanessa and Linda slowly pushed me out of Ryan's life before making moves toward my property. It felt intentional now, strategic, like they needed me emotionally weakened first. Noah finally spoke carefully. Control is easier when someone feels alone. I closed my eyes. He was right. That realization frightened me most of all, because Vanessa hadn't simply disliked me. She had been managing me, reducing my influence over Ryan, separating us emotionally, making me doubt myself. And somehow, my son either hadn't noticed or had chosen not to notice. Noah stepped beside the editing table again. There's one image I almost didn't show you. I turned slowly. Why? Because I wasn't sure if it would help or hurt. He clicked another file open. This image was blurrier than the others captured farther away through the partially open suite doorway. But I recognized Ryan instantly. He stood just outside the room. My heartbeat stopped. For one horrible second. I thought he had known everything, that he had participated. But then I noticed his expression. Confused, distracted. He wasn't looking at the documents. He was checking his phone while Vanessa spoke quickly toward him from inside the room. Then the next frame appeared. Vanessa moved immediately between Ryan and the table holding my papers, blocking his view. My knees nearly gave out with relief. Not complete relief, but enough to breathe again. He didn't see, I whispered. I don't think he did. Noah agreed carefully. I stared at Ryan's frozen image on the screen. My son looked tired, unaware, trusting. And suddenly a new kind of grief hit me, because maybe Ryan wasn't evil. Maybe he was weak, manipulated, blind. And somehow that hurt almost worse. I sat down again slowly. What do I do now? Noah hesitated. You need a lawyer. Immediately, one name came to mind. Helen Brooks, my late husband's old friend, sharp, calm, impossible to intimidate. I hadn't spoken to Helen much in recent years, but suddenly I knew exactly who I needed beside me. Because this situation was no longer family conflict. It was legal, calculated, dangerous, and for the first time since Thomas died, I realized nobody was coming to rescue me. I would have to protect myself. Helen Brooks still worked out of the same downtown Columbus office she had occupied for nearly 30 years. The brass nameplate outside her door hadn't changed. Neither had Helen. At 71 years old, she still carried herself with the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades destroying dishonest people in courtrooms. She had been one of Thomas's closest friends before he died. Back then, the three of us used to host backyard cookouts during summers while Ryan chased fireflies across the lawn. After Thomas's funeral, Helen quietly handled most of the legal paperwork for me without charging a cent. You focus on surviving, she'd said gently. I'll handle the rest. Now, 20 years later, I sat across from her again with Noah's photographs spread across her conference table. Helen studied every image in complete silence. No dramatic reactions, no shocked gasps. Just careful attention. That somehow scared me more. Finally, she removed her reading glasses slowly. Well, she said calmly, this is extremely serious. I wrapped my hands tightly around my coffee cup. You believe me? Helen gave me a sharp look. Erica, these photographs are evidence. Relief flooded through me so quickly I nearly cried. For days, part of me had feared I sounded paranoid, emotional, like some aging mother inventing conspiracies because her son married a wealthy woman. But Helen wasn't dismissing me. She looked angry. That notary concerns me most, she continued. Private property transfer specialists don't casually attend weddings. I nodded weakly. Noah found preliminary filing activity connected to my house. Helen's expression darkened immediately. Show me. I handed her the printed public records Noah had gathered. She studied them carefully for several long minutes. Then she stood abruptly and walked toward her office computer. I want direct access to county records. The next hour felt endless. Helen typed quickly while I sat frozen nearby listening to keyboards click and printers hum softly around the office. Finally, she leaned back heavily in her chair. There it is. My stomach tightened. What? Helen rotated the monitor toward me. Legal filing documents filled the screen. Property inquiry requests, transfer preparation notices, verification drafts. My eyes moved shakily across the page until I saw it. Transferee Ryan Morgan. I stopped breathing. Oh my God. The room tilted slightly. My own son's name sat attached to paperwork involving my home. I stared at it for so long the letters blurred. No, I whispered finally. Ryan wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Sign paperwork without telling me. Trust Vanessa too easily, ignore obvious warning signs. The truth was, I no longer knew what my son was capable of. Helen remained calm. This doesn't prove Ryan knowingly participated. I looked at her desperately. Then why is his name there? Because if someone intended to transfer your home quietly, your son would be the least suspicious recipient. That answer chilled me. Because she was right. Nobody would question a mother leaving property to her only child, especially an aging widow. Helen clicked another file open. This is more troubling. I leaned forward. Attached beneath the transfer draft was a scanned signature page. My blood ran cold instantly. There was my name, Erica Morgan. Signed in blue ink, except I had never signed it. For a second, I genuinely couldn't speak. I just stared at the forged signature while something icy spread through my chest. "It looks real," I whispered. Helen nodded grimly. "Very real." My hand flew to my mouth. The signature wasn't sloppy or obviously fake. Whoever copied it had studied my handwriting carefully. The curves, the pressure points, even the slight upward angle at the end of my last name. I suddenly remembered the documents Vanessa handled during the wedding, the papers in my purse, the years of birthday cards, checks, and handwritten notes Ryan had likely brought into their apartment without thinking twice. Access. They'd had access to my signature for years. "I feel sick," I whispered. Helen softened slightly. "You need to stay calm." "How am I supposed to stay calm?" My voice cracked suddenly. "Someone forged legal documents to steal my house, and we're going to stop them." The certainty in her tone steadied me slightly. Helen printed several pages and organized them neatly into a folder. "First, we lock down every financial and property-related account you own." I nodded quickly. "Second, I want a forensic handwriting expert examining this signature immediately." "Okay." "Third," she paused carefully, "you need to consider the possibility that this has been developing longer than you realize." That sentence settled heavily between us, because deep down, I already knew she was right. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. Slowly, patiently, emotionally, I suddenly thought back to every moment Vanessa encouraged Ryan to distance himself from me. Every holiday missed, every uncomfortable conversation about aging, every subtle implication that I couldn't manage alone anymore. They weren't simply separating Ryan from me emotionally. They were building a narrative. An older widow, lonely, overwhelmed, possibly confused, easier to control. The realization made my skin crawl. Helen interrupted my thoughts carefully. "There's another issue." I looked up. If they were preparing transfer paperwork, they may eventually escalate toward competency concerns. I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means someone could attempt to argue you're mentally unfit to manage your own finances." I stared at her in horror. "No, it happens more often than you think." The room suddenly felt airless again. They try to say I'm unstable. Helen nodded grimly. "Isolation helps those arguments. Emotional distress helps too." I almost laughed bitterly. Of course it did. Vanessa hadn't just humiliated me socially. She had weakened my emotional support system first. I leaned back slowly, exhausted. Then another terrifying thought hit me. What if Ryan knows Helen was quiet for a moment? I don't know yet. That answer hurt more than false reassurance would have, because it was honest. I stared down at the forged signature again. I raised him better than this. My voice sounded small suddenly, broken. Helen's expression softened for the first time all afternoon. Sometimes good people become blind when they love the wrong person. Tears burned my eyes immediately. I thought about Ryan as a child again. Feverish at age 9 while I sat awake beside him all night changing cold washcloths on his forehead. Crying after his first heartbreak at 16. Calling me from law school because he was scared he wouldn't succeed. That boy had loved me. I knew he had. So where had he gone? Or worse, had he simply grown into a man willing to sacrifice me for comfort and status? Helen closed the folder carefully. I need you to listen to me now, Erica. I looked up. From this moment forward, you trust nobody without verification. Not Vanessa, not Richard Whitmore. And until we know more, she paused carefully, not even Ryan completely. The word shattered something inside me, because no mother wants to hear that sentence spoken aloud. Not even Ryan. I nodded slowly anyway, because deep down, I already understood it was true. As I prepared to leave Helen's office, she handed me a copy of the forged signature page. Keep this somewhere safe. I stared at the paper, at my own name written by someone else's hand, and for the first time since all this began, fear turned into something colder. Determination. Because whoever planned this believed I was weak, lonely, easy to manipulate. They thought I would stay quiet to avoid losing my son, but they had forgotten something important. I survived losing the love of my life at 26 years old. I survived raising a child alone while working myself to exhaustion. I survived grief that nearly destroyed me. And if necessary, I would survive this too. 3 days later, Helen called me at 7 in the morning. Don't panic, she said immediately, which of course guaranteed that I did. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. What happened? I found something connected to Vanessa. My chest tightened instantly. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table while rain tapped softly against the windows. For the past several days, my entire life had become routines of fear, checking locks twice before bed, watching unfamiliar cars too carefully, jumping every time my phone rang. Even my own house felt different now, not comforting anymore, exposed. What did you find? I asked quietly. Helen exhaled. I had a private investigator pull archived civil records involving the Whitmore family. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course the Whitmores had enough money to bury problems. People like them always did. There was an incident about 4 years ago involving Vanessa and a former fiancé. I froze. Former fiancé. Ryan had once casually mentioned Vanessa being engaged years earlier, but the story had always sounded vague and short-lived. She told Ryan they broke up because he was controlling, I said carefully. Helen made a small sound that clearly meant she doubted that version. The fiancé's name was Andrew Keller, tech entrepreneur, significant family money. My stomach tightened further. Another wealthy man, Helen continued. 6 months before their planned wedding, Andrew filed a private fraud complaint through his attorneys. I gripped the edge of the table harder. What kind of fraud, property-related financial manipulation? The room went silent. I stared at the wall while Helen explained. According to the records, Andrew had accused Vanessa of pressuring him into transferring partial ownership of several investment properties before marriage. Nothing illegal at first glance, except large sums of money began disappearing into accounts connected to shell businesses associated with Richard Whitmore. When Andrew confronted Vanessa, the engagement collapsed. The complaint never reached public court proceedings. Settled privately, buried quietly. Money had erased it. I felt physically cold all over. She's done this before, I whispered. Yes. My heartbeat pounded heavily now, and Ryan has no idea I highly doubt it. I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed. Part of me had still wanted to believe this situation was somehow isolated, emotional, messy, complicated, but this sounded practiced, professional, like Vanessa and her family had refined this pattern over years. Helen's voice softened slightly. There's more. Of course there was. The investigator also found financial pressure on the Whitmore family businesses over the last 18 months. I frowned. What kind of pressure? Debt restructuring, investment losses, property overextension. Suddenly everything shifted into sharper focus. The luxury, the image, the perfection. Maybe it wasn't as stable as it appeared. They needed money, I whispered. Possibly. And suddenly my modest little Columbus home no longer looked insignificant compared to the Whitmore empire. A fully paid-off property, no mortgage, increasing value, easy emotional access through Ryan. Dear God. I pressed trembling fingers against my forehead. All this time I had believed Vanessa disliked me because I was ordinary, because I embarrassed her socially, but maybe I had misunderstood entirely. Maybe she never underestimated me at all. Maybe she had been calculating my value from the beginning. After hanging up with Helen, I spent nearly an hour wandering through my house again, touching furniture, family photographs, the kitchen counter where Ryan used to do homework. I kept imagining strangers reducing this entire life into numbers on paperwork, transferable assets, ownership, value. That afternoon, Ryan called unexpectedly. The sound of his ringtone nearly stopped my heart. For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen. Then I answered carefully. Hi, sweetheart. Hey, Mom. His voice sounded tired, almost stressed. For one dangerous moment. Hearing him softened me immediately. That's the terrible thing about loving your child. Even after heartbreak, part of your heart still runs toward them automatically. I was thinking about coming down next weekend, Ryan said casually. Alarm bells exploded instantly in my mind. Why now, after weeks of distance? After Helen's discoveries, I forced my voice steady. That sudden? Well, he hesitated slightly. Vanessa thought it might be good to spend more time together. Vanessa thought. Always Vanessa thought. Not Ryan missed me. Not Ryan wanted to reconnect. Vanessa thought. My stomach turned. That's kind, I replied carefully. Ryan continued quickly. And actually, there are a few financial things we could help you organize while we're there. There it was. I closed my eyes slowly. What financial things? Retirement planning stuff, estate planning, making life simpler, Simpler, such a harmless word. People destroy entire lives using harmless words. I walked slowly toward the living room window. Outside, an elderly neighbor watered flowers peacefully beneath soft afternoon sunlight. Normal life continued everywhere except inside my chest. "Ryan," I asked quietly, "are you unhappy?" Silence. The question clearly surprised him. "What are you happy?" A longer pause this time. When Ryan finally answered, his voice sounded careful. "Of course I am." But he didn't sound convincing, not even close. And suddenly I wondered something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. What if Ryan was trapped too, not innocent? Not entirely, but trapped emotionally inside a marriage built on manipulation. I thought about Vanessa's constant control over conversations, the way she redirected him, managed social situations, framed my concerns as emotional instability. What if she'd done the same thing to him slowly over time? Ryan interrupted my thoughts. "Mom!" "Yes. You've seemed distant lately." I nearly laughed at the irony. Distant. After months of being emotionally abandoned. "I've just been thinking a lot." "Well," he cleared his throat awkwardly. "Vanessa worries you might be isolating yourself." There it was again. Concern disguised as control. "She worries about me. She cares about you." No. Vanessa cared about access, about influence, about positioning herself closer to everything Ryan trusted. I suddenly felt exhausted beyond words. "Ryan," I said softly, "did Vanessa ever tell you about Andrew Keller?" The silence afterward was immediate and sharp. Who her reaction had been so fast and defensive before he even knew why I was asking, that my heart sank instantly. An old fiancé. "What about him?" I listened carefully. Ryan sounded tense now, guarded. "She mentioned him once," he admitted. Why I hesitated. Helen had warned me not to confront him recklessly yet, but hearing Ryan defend Vanessa blindly again suddenly hurt too much. "Did she tell you why they broke up, Mom?" "That's a simple question." Ryan sighed heavily. "She said he became possessive and controlling. Exactly the story I expected." My chest tightened painfully, because if Vanessa manipulated people professionally, then every previous relationship likely followed the same script. Charm, dependence, isolation, control, then financial entanglement. I lowered my voice carefully. "You need to be careful, Ryan." Immediately his tone hardened. "There it is." "What does that mean?" "You've never liked her." "That's not true." "Yes, it is." His frustration exploded faster than I expected. "You judge everything about Vanessa because her family has money." The accusation stunned me silent. "Money? After everything he truly believed that I spent my entire life supporting you," I whispered. "Do you honestly think I care about wealth?" Ryan exhaled sharply. "I just think you want someone to blame because things changed. Changed. Such a small word for losing your son piece by piece." Before I could answer, another voice appeared faintly in the background. "Vanessa, Ryan." His tone softened immediately when responding to her. "Coming." That one word hurt more than the entire argument, because once upon a time, that softness belonged to me too. "I have to go," he said quickly. Of course he did. Before hanging up, I said something quietly that surprised even myself. "If you ever need me, Ryan, truly need me, I will still answer the phone." Silence filled the line for a moment. Then, very softly, almost like his old self returning briefly, Ryan whispered, "I know, Mom." The call ended, and for the first time since all this began, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was fighting for the truth about what had happened to my son. I didn't tell Ryan about the forged signature right away. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to drive to Chicago, immediately slam the evidence onto his marble kitchen counter, and force him to look directly at what his wife had done. But Helen stopped me. If Ryan is still emotionally under Vanessa's influence, she warned confronting him too aggressively could push him deeper toward her. I hated that she was right, so instead we waited. Carefully, painfully. Helen arranged for the forged signature to be analyzed by a forensic handwriting expert, while Noah backed up every original wedding image across multiple encrypted drives. "People with money panic when evidence appears," Helen said calmly. "We prepare first." Meanwhile, Ryan kept texting casually, as if our last conversation hadn't left me emotionally shattered, as if normalcy still existed between us. "How's your week going? You should really let us visit soon." Vanessa found a condo building you'd love downtown. Every message felt artificial now, managed. And the more Ryan pushed the idea of downsizing, the more terrified I became. Finally, after another sleepless night, I made a decision. I needed to see my son face to face. Not through phone calls, not through filtered conversations with Vanessa hovering nearby. I needed to look into Ryan's eyes and find out whether the boy I raised was still somewhere inside him. So 3 days later, I drove to Chicago unannounced. The entire trip, my stomach twisted with anxiety. I kept rehearsing different versions of the conversation in my head. Maybe Ryan truly didn't know. Maybe once he saw the photographs, everything would collapse instantly. Maybe he would protect me. Maybe he would finally see Vanessa clearly. Or maybe I would discover I had already lost my son long ago. Ryan and Vanessa lived in a luxury high-rise overlooking the river downtown. The lobby alone made me uncomfortable. Glass walls, polished, black marble security staff, dressed better than most people attending church back home. When I arrived at the front desk, the concierge smiled politely. "Do you have an appointment with Mr. Morgan?" Appointment? Not visit, not family. Appointment. I forced a smile. "No, but he's my son." The woman checked something on her screen. Then her expression shifted slightly. Almost awkward. "He isn't expecting anyone today." Of course he wasn't. Because mothers apparently required scheduling now. "I'll wait," I said quietly. I sat in the lobby for nearly 40 minutes before Ryan finally appeared from the elevator. The second he saw me, surprise flashed across his face. "Mom." He walked over quickly. "What are you doing here?" I stood slowly. "I needed to talk to you." Ryan looked immediately uneasy, not happy, uneasy. We could have planned something. I didn't want Vanessa there. That landed exactly as intended. Ryan's shoulders stiffened instantly. "Why?" "Because your wife stole documents from my purse at your wedding. Because your wife may have forged paperwork to steal my house. Because I no longer know if you're protecting me or helping destroy me." But instead I simply said, "Because I need to speak to my son alone." Ryan rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. For a second I saw the old Ryan again. Conflicted, tired, not cruel, just overwhelmed. Finally he nodded once. "Come upstairs." Their penthouse apartment looked exactly like Vanessa. Beautiful, expensive, cold. Everything inside appeared carefully curated for appearances. White furniture untouched by real life. Decorative books nobody read. Giant windows overlooking the city like a luxury advertisement. No warmth, no history, no soul. Ryan loosened his tie while I sat stiffly on the edge of an ivory-colored sofa that probably cost more than my first car. "Vanessa's at a charity event," he explained. Of course she was. Vanessa always stayed publicly polished. I reached into my purse slowly. Ryan noticed immediately. "What's going on?" Without answering, I handed him one of Noah's printed photographs. Ryan frowned slightly. At first, confusion crossed his face. Then he looked closer, and everything changed. His entire body went still. I watched the exact moment recognition hit him. "That's—" His voice caught. "That's Vanessa." I said nothing. Ryan stared at the image longer. His wife's hand inside my purse, Linda near the door, the notary examining documents. Color slowly drained from Ryan's face. "What is this you tell me?" He looked up sharply. "I've never seen this before." I searched his face carefully, and I believed him. At least in that moment. The shock looked real. Ryan grabbed another photo quickly, then another. His breathing became uneven. "Where did you get these? The photographer found them?" Ryan looked genuinely shaken now. "No," he whispered. "No. There has to be some explanation." That sentence hurt. Not because he defended Vanessa, because he did it automatically, instantly. Without even considering my pain first. "Explanation," I repeated quietly. Ryan stood and paced toward the windows. "This doesn't make sense. She stole documents from my purse. You don't know that." The denial came fast again. I stared at him in disbelief. "She is literally holding my envelope." "That doesn't mean Ryan." My voice cracked sharply enough to stop him. He turned slowly. I reached into my purse again and removed the forged signature copy Helen had printed. This was filed against my property. Ryan frowned and took the paper. Then I watched horror spread across his face for the second time. "That's your signature." "No," I whispered. "It's a copy of my signature." Ryan looked physically sick now. "I don't understand." Neither did I. He stared down at the document silently. Then, very quietly, he said, "My name is on this." "Yes." Ryan sank into a nearby chair slowly. For several long moments, neither of us spoke. The city skyline glowed silently beyond the windows behind him. Finally, Ryan looked up. "You think I'm involved in this?" The pain in his voice nearly destroyed me. But I answered honestly, "I don't know what to think anymore." Ryan closed his eyes hard. "That's not fair." "No." My voice trembled now. "Do you know what hasn't been fair, watching my son slowly disappear while his wife treated me like an inconvenience? That's not what happened." "Then what happened?" Ryan stood again abruptly. "You've hated Vanessa from the beginning." "There it is again," I whispered bitterly. "Every single time. Because it's true. No, Ryan. I wanted to love her. I tried to love her." Ryan looked torn apart internally now. I could see it. His loyalty to Vanessa battling against the evidence sitting directly in front of him. Then I said the thing I had avoided for months. I heard her at the wedding. Ryan froze. Heard what she said after that night I wouldn't be a problem anymore. Silence exploded between us. Ryan looked shaken again. "She wouldn't?" "She did." He turned away immediately. That told me everything. Not certainty, not innocence, fear. Because somewhere deep down, my son already knew his wife was capable of cruelty. He just hadn't wanted to face it. Finally, Ryan whispered, "What do you want me to do?" The question broke my heart completely. Because he still didn't understand. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want money. I wanted my son to protect me without being asked. Instead, I looked at a grown man waiting for instructions while his marriage collapsed around him. "I want the truth," I said softly. At that exact moment, the front door opened. Vanessa walked inside, laughing into her phone. Then she saw me, and every trace of warmth vanished from her face instantly. The moment Vanessa saw the photographs spread across the coffee table, her expression changed. Not confusion, not shock. Calculation. It happened fast, so fast most people might have missed it. Her eyes flicked from the images to Ryan's face, then to me, measuring the situation in seconds. Then the performance began. "Erica," she said softly, placing a manicured hand against her chest. "What is this?" I almost admired how convincing she sounded. Almost. Ryan stood rigid near the windows, pale and shaken. "You went through my mother's purse," he said. Vanessa blinked slowly. "What?" "The photographs," he snapped. "Answer the question." She stepped closer, carefully, heels clicking softly against the marble floor. "Oh my God." She picked up one image and stared at it dramatically. "This looks horrible. Looks horrible. Not is horrible. Looks horrible." I watched her closely now, really watched her. For the first time, I stopped seeing the polished surface and started noticing the machinery underneath. Every pause intentional, every expression controlled, every sentence designed to redirect emotion. Vanessa looked directly at me with wounded disbelief. "You think I stole from you?" Ryan interrupted sharply. "Then what were you doing?" She turned toward him immediately, lowering her voice into something soothing. "Baby, your mother left her purse open in the bridal suite. Linda was worried someone else might take something." I stared at her. The lie came effortlessly. Ryan looked uncertain now. God help me, uncertain. "She was protecting my belongings," I asked quietly. Vanessa nodded immediately. "Yes." Then she pointed toward the older man in the photographs, and Martin was reviewing paperwork for Richard's business deal before the reception started. Everything overlapped awkwardly. Another smooth explanation, another attempt to make me feel irrational for questioning her, but this time something had changed. I was no longer emotionally desperate for her approval, which meant I could finally see the manipulation clearly. I reached into my purse and handed Ryan the forged signature page again. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward it, just for a second. But I saw it. Fear. Tiny. Sharp. Gone almost instantly. Ryan noticed too, his voice lowered dangerously. "What is this, Vanessa?" She glanced at the document briefly before sighing. "I don't know. It's transfer paperwork involving my mother's house." Now Vanessa turned fully toward me again. Her expression softened into pity, and suddenly I understood exactly what Helen meant about competency attacks, because Vanessa looked at me the way people look at someone unstable, fragile, confused. "Erica," she said gently, "I really think you're misunderstanding what you found." There it was. The shift, subtle, strategic. Not you're lying, not you're wrong, You're misunderstanding. Like an elderly woman struggling to keep up mentally, I felt rage stir deep inside me. You forged my signature. Vanessa gasped softly. Ryan listened to her. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was terrifying. She was doing exactly what Helen predicted. Vanessa turned back toward Ryan with careful concern. I didn't want to say anything before because I know how sensitive this situation is. My blood ran cold. Ryan frowned. What situation? Vanessa hesitated dramatically, then lowered her voice. Your mother hasn't seemed entirely stable lately. There it was. Finally. Openly. The room went completely silent. Ryan stared at her. What are you talking about? She forgets conversations, Vanessa continued softly. She becomes emotional very quickly. She accused me of stealing months ago, too. That's because you did. Vanessa ignored me completely now. Classic manipulation. Remove the target from credibility. Speak around them instead of to them. She's isolated, Vanessa whispered sadly. And grief can resurface later in life, especially after losing Thomas. My chest tightened painfully. She was using my dead husband now. Ryan looked visibly uncomfortable. Vanessa? I'm serious, she insisted gently. I've been worried for months. I suddenly understood why Ryan had started asking strange questions recently. About my memory, my retirement, my ability to manage the house alone. Vanessa had been planting seeds carefully behind my back. Not all at once, slowly, like poison. I stood abruptly. Don't you dare use my husband to make me sound insane? Vanessa flinched slightly as if frightened by my tone. Another performance. And suddenly, horrifyingly, I saw Ryan hesitate. Just hesitate. Only for a second. But it was enough to shatter something inside me completely. Because my own son, the child I sacrificed everything for, looked at me for one tiny moment as if he wasn't entirely sure who to believe. I turned toward him slowly. You think I'm confused? Ryan rubbed his forehead hard. No. Mom, I just number answer me. Vanessa stepped forward quickly. This isn't helping her emotional state. Her emotional state. Like I wasn't even in the room anymore. Like I was already becoming a legal problem to manage. Ryan looked exhausted. Everyone needs to calm down. That sentence almost destroyed me. Calm down. After forged documents, after emotional manipulation, after months of isolation, I stared at my son in disbelief. Do you understand what she's doing to me? Ryan looked trapped now, caught between evidence and the woman he married. Vanessa moved closer to him carefully, protectively, claiming territory. I love your mother, she said softly. That's why this hurts so much. Liar. Everything about her suddenly looked monstrous to me. Not loud cruelty, not screaming rage. Controlled cruelty. The kind that smiles while dismantling someone's life quietly. I picked up the photographs from the table slowly. You know what the saddest part is? I whispered. Neither of them answered. I spent months blaming myself. Tears burned my eyes now, despite my efforts. I thought maybe I was too emotional, too attached, too difficult. I looked directly at Ryan. Meanwhile, your wife was building a case against me. Ryan's face tightened sharply. What case? Vanessa spoke before I could answer. Nobody is building a case. Yes, you are. I turned toward Ryan fully now. She's preparing to argue I'm mentally unfit. Silence exploded across the room. Ryan looked stunned. Then slowly, very slowly, he turned toward Vanessa, and for the first time since I arrived, real suspicion appeared in his eyes. Tiny, but unmistakable. Vanessa saw it too. Her expression changed instantly again. More urgency now. Ryan, think about this logically, she said quickly. Your mother suddenly appears with manipulated photographs and conspiracy theories. Manipulated, I repeated sharply. Yes. I laughed bitterly. Finally. There it was. Not denial anymore. Attack the evidence. Classic desperation. Ryan looked shaken. The photographer has originals, I said quietly. High-resolution originals. Vanessa's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Another tiny crack in the mask. Ryan noticed. I saw him notice. Then his phone rang suddenly. Vanessa glanced toward it immediately. Richard Whitmore. Ryan answered automatically. Hey. Even across the room I could hear Richard's booming voice through the speaker. Then Ryan's expression changed. Wait, what? Vanessa went pale. Ryan slowly lowered the phone from his ear. What do you mean, lawyers? The room turned deathly still. Richard continued talking loudly through the speaker. Ryan listened silently for several seconds. Then he looked at Vanessa with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear. Real fear. Finally, Ryan whispered, "Dad says county investigators contacted one of your father's business offices this morning." Vanessa's face lost all color, and suddenly, for the first time since this nightmare began, I knew she was no longer fully in control. Everything changed after that phone call, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for the illusion to crack. Ryan stood motionless in the center of the penthouse, while Richard Whitmore's voice continued spilling through the phone speaker in sharp, irritated bursts. "Told them not to contact the office directly. Absolutely ridiculous. Handle your wife immediately." Ryan slowly pulled the phone away from his ear. His face looked pale now. Older somehow. Vanessa recovered first. "Of course she did?" She walked toward Ryan quickly, lowering her voice into something calm and controlled again. "Your father is overreacting." Ryan looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since I'd arrived, he didn't immediately soften under her gaze. "What investigators?" he asked quietly. Vanessa crossed her arms. "I don't know." "You don't know," Ryan repeated. "They probably contacted one of Dad's companies because Martin occasionally handles documentation work for us." Documentation work? Such clean language for something filthy. Ryan glanced down at the forged transfer papers still sitting on the coffee table, then back at Vanessa. "Did you try to transfer my mother's house silence?" Vanessa didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation was everything. I saw Ryan notice it too. The room suddenly felt painfully quiet. Even the city noise outside seemed distant. Finally, Vanessa sighed softly like she was exhausted by unreasonable people. Nobody was stealing anything. Ryan's jaw tightened. "That's not what I asked." Her expression hardened slightly. "Barely noticeable. But there." I was trying to help. I actually laughed then. A short, bitter sound that startled even me. Vanessa turned toward me immediately. "You think this is funny?" "No," I whispered. "I think it's evil." Ryan stepped between us instinctively. Not aggressively, not protectively either. Just overwhelmed. "I need the truth," he said quietly. Vanessa looked genuinely offended now. "You think I'd hurt your mother?" I wanted to scream. Not because of the question, because she still framed herself as the victim. Ryan rubbed both hands over his face slowly, then explained the paperwork. Vanessa hesitated again. Then she made a mistake. A real one. The transfer wasn't even finalized. The second the words left her mouth, the entire room froze. Ryan stared at her. I felt my heartbeat stop, because she had just admitted it existed. Vanessa realized it instantly, too. Her face lost color. "That's not what I meant." But it was too late. Ryan stepped backwards slowly, like he no longer recognized her. There was a transfer. Vanessa's voice sharpened now. "Ryan, listen to me carefully." "No." His voice cracked unexpectedly. "You listen to me." I had never heard my son sound like that before. Not angry exactly, destroyed. "What did you do?" Vanessa looked panicked for the first time since entering the apartment. Not emotional panic, control panic. Like someone watching a carefully built structure collapse. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," she whispered. Those words chilled me to my core. Ryan stared at her in disbelief. "What does that mean?" Vanessa exhaled shakily and sat down slowly across from us. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then she looked directly at Ryan. "My father's businesses are struggling." There it was. The truth. Ugly and exposed beneath all the luxury. Ryan said nothing. Vanessa continued carefully. "We had debt problems after the real estate losses last year. I thought about the designer clothes, the penthouse, the lavish wedding, all of it balancing on financial collapse underneath. We needed temporary stability," Vanessa whispered. I stared at her. "You tried to steal my home for stability." Vanessa's eyes flashed defensively. "It wasn't stealing." My voice rose for the first time. "You forged my signature." Ryan flinched visibly at the word forged. Vanessa stood abruptly. "Do you have any idea what pressure I've been under?" she snapped. There she was, finally, the real Vanessa. No softness, no polished perfection, just anger. "My father was drowning," she continued sharply. "Do you understand that everything we built was collapsing? And your solution was destroying me," I whispered. Vanessa looked away briefly. That house was sitting there, fully paid off while you lived alone. The cruelty of that sentence hit harder than I expected. Sitting there, like my home was abandoned property waiting to be claimed. Ryan looked physically ill now. You planned this. Vanessa's expression softened immediately again when she looked at him. Baby, I was trying to protect our future. Our future. Not his mother, not family. Assets, positioning, survival. Ryan shook his head slowly. You isolated me from her. Vanessa blinked. What? You made me think she was unstable? That's not true. You told me she was emotional, confused, lonely. Vanessa's silence answered for her. Ryan turned away sharply, pacing toward the windows. I watched my son's entire reality collapse in real time. Every conversation, every manipulation, every carefully planted doubt. Then Ryan stopped moving completely. What else? He asked quietly. Vanessa frowned. What? What else have you lied about? That question scared her. I saw it instantly. Because suddenly Vanessa no longer controlled the emotional narrative. Ryan was thinking independently again. Dangerous for someone like her. Vanessa moved toward him carefully. You're overwhelmed right now. Ryan laughed bitterly. My God. He turned back toward her slowly. That's what you always do. She froze. You make people question themselves instead of answering. For the first time, Vanessa genuinely looked cornered. Then her phone rang. She ignored it. Seconds later, it rang again. And again. Finally, she glanced down. Linda Whitmore. Vanessa declined the call immediately. Ryan noticed. Answer it. No, answer the phone. Vanessa's composure cracked further. I said no. Ryan stared at her for several long seconds. Then, very quietly, he asked, Did your parents know silence? That was answer enough. Ryan physically recoiled, like something inside him had finally broken. I had never seen heartbreak look like that before. Not dramatic tears, not yelling. Just a man realizing the person he trusted most had quietly poisoned his entire life. Vanessa reached for him desperately. Ryan. He stepped away immediately. Don't. The word sliced through the room. Vanessa's eyes widened. You don't mean that. Yes, he whispered. I think I do. For a moment, nobody moved. Then there was another knock at the penthouse door. Sharp. Unexpected. Ryan frowned and walked toward it automatically. When he opened the door, Helen Brooks stepped inside, calmly carrying a leather briefcase. Behind her stood Noah Bennett. Vanessa went completely white. Helen looked directly at her. Good evening, she said evenly. Ryan stared in confusion. Helen. I thought it would be wise to continue this conversation with witnesses present. Vanessa's breathing became shallow now. Helen walked calmly toward the coffee table and placed several folders down. Then she opened the first one. Inside were enlarged forensic reports, email records, financial filings, and dozens of printed photographs from the wedding. Noah quietly connected a tablet to the enormous television mounted across the penthouse wall. Then, one by one, the wedding images filled the screen. Huge. Impossible to deny. Vanessa opening my purse. Linda watching the hallway. The notary handling my documents. Frame after frame after frame. The truth looked monstrous displayed that large. Ryan sank slowly into a chair beneath the glowing television screen, and while the images continued changing silently above him, my son finally began to understand what his silence had cost. Nobody spoke while the photographs played across the television screen. The silence itself became unbearable. One image after another illuminated the dark penthouse living room in cold white light. Vanessa's hand inside my purse, the yellow envelope, the forged paperwork. Linda Whitmore standing guard near the bridal suite doorway. Even enlarged, the images remained painfully clear. Impossible to explain away, impossible to soften. Ryan sat motionless on the sofa beneath the television, staring upward like a man watching his own life collapse. Vanessa stood near the kitchen island with both arms wrapped tightly around herself. For the first time since I met her, she looked genuinely afraid. Not embarrassed. Afraid. Helen opened another folder calmly. I received the official forensic report this afternoon, she said evenly. She slid several pages across the coffee table toward Ryan. The signature on the transfer documents is fraudulent. Ryan picked up the report slowly. His hands trembled. I noticed that immediately because Ryan's hands almost never shook. Even as a child, he had been calm under pressure. But now, he looked broken. Helen continued speaking with quiet precision. The handwriting expert identified multiple tracing inconsistencies consistent with forgery replication. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. Ryan looked up slowly. You forged my mother's signature. This time it wasn't a question. Vanessa swallowed hard. Ryan. No. His voice cracked sharply. No more explanations. The room went still again. Ryan stared at her with devastation I could physically feel from across the room. How long, he whispered. Vanessa looked down at the floor. That's not important. How long? Tears suddenly filled Ryan's eyes. My son rarely cried. I could count the times on one hand. Once when Thomas died. Once after his first heartbreak in college. And now. Vanessa finally answered quietly. After the wedding. Ryan let out a hollow laugh that sounded more painful than anger. The wedding? He rubbed his face hard. Our wedding? Noah stood silently near the windows, clearly uncomfortable, witnessing everything unravel. Helen remained composed beside him, though even she looked saddened now. Ryan looked back down at the forged documents again. Then another realization hit him. You used my name. Vanessa's voice softened immediately. Because it would have protected us both eventually. Us. Still us. Even now. Ryan shook his head slowly, like he could no longer process the person standing in front of him. You turned me into a weapon against my own mother. That sentence nearly destroyed me, because it was true, even without knowing the full scheme. Ryan's emotional distance had helped them isolate me. Vanessa stepped toward him carefully. I was trying to build security for our future. Ryan looked up sharply. You already had a future. You don't understand the pressure my family was under. No, Ryan whispered painfully. I don't think I understand anything about you anymore. Vanessa's phone began vibrating again on the kitchen counter. This time she ignored it completely. A few seconds later, Richard Whitmore himself called Ryan directly. Ryan stared at the screen, then answered on speaker without warning. Richard's furious voice exploded through the penthouse instantly. What the hell is happening over there? Vanessa flinched visibly. Ryan spoke quietly. Did you know silence? Then Richard exhaled sharply. Ryan, this is more complicated than you think. That wasn't denial. I saw Ryan realize it too. His face crumpled slightly. Oh my God. Richard continued quickly. Your wife was trying to stabilize temporary financial exposure by stealing my mother's home. Nobody stole anything yet. Helen finally stepped forward. Actually, Mr. Whitmore attempted fraudulent transfer filings qualify as criminal conduct under Illinois property statutes. Richard fell silent immediately, then his tone hardened. Who is this Helen Brooks? Attorney for Erica Morgan. Another silence. I imagined Richard realizing the situation had escaped private control completely. Finally, he spoke coldly. This family matter can still be resolved quietly. That sentence told me everything about people like him. Not remorse, not accountability, containment. Ryan laughed bitterly again, quietly Ryan. Nomdra, my son, stood slowly, and for the first time in nearly a year, I saw Thomas in him. Not in appearance, in character, in the sudden refusal to tolerate cruelty. You manipulated me, Ryan said hoarsely. All of you. Son, don't call me that right now. Richard stopped speaking immediately. Ryan's breathing became uneven. You let me believe my mother was unstable. Vanessa burst in defensively. I never said unstable. Ryan turned toward her slowly. You implied it every single day. She looked cornered again. I was trying to help you establish healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries? I almost couldn't believe she still used therapy language to justify emotional abuse. Ryan looked exhausted beyond words. No, he whispered. You isolated me from the only person who ever truly loved me without conditions. The sentence hit every person in the room differently. For me, it shattered my heart completely. Because despite everything, despite the pain, hearing my son finally understand what he'd done hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears now. Real tears this time. I love you. Ryan stared at her silently. Then very quietly he said, I don't know if you know what love actually is. That seemed to wound her more than anything else. Richard's voice interrupted sharply through the phone again. Ryan, listen carefully. Do not say anything further until legal representation is present. Ryan picked up the phone slowly, then disconnected the call entirely. The silence afterward felt enormous. Vanessa sat down suddenly like her legs could no longer hold her. For the first time, she looked less powerful, smaller somehow, human. And honestly, that frightened me too, because monsters are easier to hate than damaged people. Ryan turned toward me slowly then. I will never forget his face in that moment. Not because he looked guilty, because he looked devastated. Like a little boy who finally realized the house had been burning long before he smelled smoke. "Mom?" His voice broke completely. "I am so sorry." Tears filled my eyes immediately. For a second, I saw flashes of every version of him I had ever loved. The 7-year-old sleeping beside Thomas's old sweatshirt. The teenager practicing graduation speeches in the mirror. The young man promising to take care of me someday. And suddenly, I understood something painful. Ryan had failed me, deeply, but he hadn't stopped loving me. He had simply become weak enough to let someone else reshape his reality. I walked toward him slowly. Vanessa watched silently from the couch, broken, defeated. I stopped in front of my son. Then I said the hardest truth I had learned through all of this. Love without respect destroys people, Ryan. He closed his eyes as tears finally slid down his face. I know. And for the first time in months, I believed he truly did. 3 months later, spring arrived quietly in Columbus. The maple tree outside my kitchen window had begun blooming again, soft green leaves unfolding where winter branches once looked dead. I noticed things like that more now. Small signs of survival. Healing never comes all at once. At least not for people like me. It arrives slowly. A good night's sleep after months of anxiety. Coffee that finally tastes warm instead of bitter. The first morning you realize your chest doesn't hurt immediately after waking up. That's how recovery happened for me. Piece by piece. The legal fallout moved quickly after everything collapsed in Chicago. Helen handled most of it, so I didn't have to relive details constantly. The forged transfer filings were formally withdrawn. The county investigation expanded into several questionable transactions connected to Richard Whitmore's businesses. Martin, the notary from the wedding, cooperated almost immediately once attorneys became involved. Vanessa's family settled privately wherever they could. Money still protected people like them in many ways, but not completely this time. Not anymore. Ryan moved out of the penthouse less than 2 weeks after our confrontation. I heard later that Vanessa tried contacting him repeatedly afterward. Long, emotional emails, apologies, explanations, promises, but something inside my son had finally broken awake. Sometimes the hardest part of growing up isn't learning who other people are. It's accepting who they were all along. As for me, I stayed in my house, exactly where I belonged. The first morning after Helen confirmed the transfer attempts had officially failed, I walked barefoot through every room slowly. The kitchen, the hallway, Thomas's old workshop in the garage. I touched the wall beside the pantry where Ryan's childhood height marks still remained faintly penciled beneath layers of paint. Age 7, age 10, age 16, a lifetime carved into drywall. I cried then. Not because I almost lost the house, because I almost let people convince me my memories were disposable. They weren't. And neither was I. Ryan began calling more often after moving out. At first, I didn't always answer. That sounds cruel, doesn't it? But boundaries feel cruel to people who benefited from your lack of them. For decades, my entire identity revolved around being available, helpful, forgiving, understanding. Now I was learning something entirely different. Self-respect. One afternoon in early April, Ryan drove to Columbus unexpectedly. This time when I opened the front door, he looked nothing like the polished attorney who once stood inside that penthouse. He looked exhausted. Human. His beard had grown unevenly and dark circles shadowed his eyes. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Ryan said quietly, "I didn't know where else to go." That sentence almost broke me. Not because he sounded weak, because he finally sounded honest. I let him inside. We sat at the kitchen table where so much of our lives had happened over the years. Homework, bills, birthday cakes, grief, ordinary Tuesdays. Ryan wrapped both hands around a coffee mug without drinking from it. I keep replaying everything he admitted softly. I stayed quiet. She controlled every conversation slowly, every conflict, every insecurity. He laughed bitterly, and I thought I was protecting my marriage. I looked at my son carefully. Manipulation works best when it arrives gradually. Ryan nodded silently. Then tears filled his eyes again. "I abandoned you." The raw guilt in his voice cut deeply. I could have comforted him immediately. The old version of me would have. But healing required honesty now. Yes, I said softly. You did. Ryan lowered his head. I hate myself for it. I reached across the table then and placed my hand gently over his. Don't waste your life hating yourself. He looked up slowly, but never forget what silence can cost. Ryan nodded through tears. That day we talked for nearly 4 hours. Really talked. No Vanessa filtering reality. No Whitmore performance. Just truth. Ryan admitted he had ignored warning signs for months because confronting them felt terrifying. Vanessa always framed criticism as betrayal. Questions became attacks. Boundaries became proof of disloyalty. And slowly, without realizing it, he stopped trusting his own instincts. I understood that better than he realized. Because manipulation doesn't only trap romantic partners. It traps entire families. Before leaving that evening, Ryan stood awkwardly near the front door. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, he said quietly. I appreciated that more than dramatic apologies. Growth sounds quieter than guilt. Then he hesitated. There's something else. I frowned slightly. Ryan walked toward his car and returned carrying a carefully wrapped package. Noah asked me to give this to you. Immediately, my chest tightened. I unwrapped the brown paper slowly. Inside was a framed photograph. The photograph. The one Noah took of me during the wedding reception. I remembered the exact moment now. I had been sitting alone on the outdoor terrace overlooking Lake Michigan while music played inside behind me. In the picture, my eyes looked sad. Deeply sad, but not broken. That surprised me most, because when I lived that moment, I thought I looked weak. Instead, the woman in the photograph looked resilient, quietly strong, still standing after disappointment, still dignified despite humiliation. Ryan stared at the picture too. I hate that I didn't see it, he whispered. I looked at him carefully. You see it now. And that mattered. Not enough to erase the damage, but enough to begin again honestly. After Ryan left, I carried the photograph into the living room and placed it above the fireplace. Not as a reminder of betrayal, as a reminder of survival. Weeks later, Noah visited Columbus while photographing another event nearby. We had lunch together at a small cafe downtown. You know, he admitted awkwardly I almost deleted those files. I smiled sadly. But you didn't. No, you changed my life. He looked uncomfortable hearing that, but it was true. Because sometimes healing begins the moment someone finally tells you you weren't imagining it. Before leaving the cafe, Noah asked quietly, "What are you going to do now?" For the first time in years, I genuinely smiled. Whatever I want. And I meant it. That summer, I joined a travel group for widowed women over 60. I visited Maine, walked beaches in Oregon, started painting badly but enthusiastically on Tuesday afternoons. I laughed more, slept better, breathed easier. And slowly, I stopped defining myself by who failed to love me properly. Because the truth is, a woman does not lose her value simply because someone else stops appreciating it. Sometimes life breaks your heart just long enough to show you how strong you really are. And sometimes, the photograph that captured your loneliest moment becomes proof that you survived it. Show more, show less. Sometimes the deepest heartbreak in life does not come from strangers. It comes from the people we would have sacrificed everything for without hesitation. As parents, especially mothers, we often spend so many years protecting our children that we slowly forget to protect ourselves. We excuse disrespect because we call it love. We tolerate distance because we fear losing connection. We stay silent because we hope kindness will eventually be returned. But this story reminds us of something important. Love without respect is not healthy love. Erica's greatest mistake was not loving her son too much. Her mistake was believing that enduring pain quietly would preserve the relationship. In reality, silence only gave manipulation more room to grow. The moment she finally faced the truth, stopped doubting her instincts, and defended her own dignity, her life began to heal. And that lesson matters at every age. No matter how old you are, your voice still matters. Your memories matter. Your boundaries matter. Your home, your peace, your self-respect. Those things are not selfish to protect. They are necessary. This story is also a reminder that manipulation rarely arrives loudly. Sometimes it enters slowly through guilt, shame, isolation, and emotional confusion. That is why listening to your instincts is so important. If something feels wrong deep in your heart, do not ignore it simply to keep the peace. But perhaps the most beautiful lesson is this: it is never too late to rebuild your life. Even after betrayal, even after loneliness, even after feeling forgotten, healing can still find you. New beginnings can still find you, and sometimes the moment that almost breaks you becomes the very moment that teaches you your true strength. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced betrayal, manipulation, or emotional distance within your own family? What lessons stayed with you the most from Erica's journey? And if you enjoy emotional family dramas with powerful life lessons and healing endings, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly means so much.